Thank you, Jackie. Okay, let's get started. Tonight's film, as I said, is Kidnapped. Kidnapped. And you can imagine I've got a lot to unpack tonight. The film is the full title of the film is Kidnapped: The Abduction of Edgardo Mortara. And the Italian title is just Rapido, which does mean kidnapped. From Italy, it's from 2023. And the director, who I will tell you about now, his name is Marco Bellocchio. Marco Bellocchio. In his nearly 60 years as a director of an overly impressive number of features, documentaries, and shorts for both television and cinema, Marco Bellocchio has encompassed a wide range of genres and subjects, yet his work remains distinctive and personal, reflecting his uncompromising views and artistic ambitions. Throughout his career, Bellocchio has questioned prevailing ideologies, confronted the church and radical left in equal measure, and challenged notions of morality and family in a manner that has established him not just as one of Italy's most important filmmakers, but a leading and influential culture figure in international cinema. In fact, this past week, I noticed that he is doing his first series for American television, and it will be on Netflix. I believe it's coming in the next month or so. Anyway, with Kidnapped, he once again takes a critical stance with an epic vision of a 19th century Vatican scandal. The Mortara case is one of the most egregious stains on the legacy of the Catholic Church. It captured the world's attention at an inflection point in Italian history. For those of you familiar with it, just as the Papal States, under the unpopular and highly conservative rule of Pope Pius IX, were close to losing their direct control of Italy, and the world was witnessing a rise at the same time in global anti-Semitism. In this incredibly true story of a young Jewish boy, the sixth son of a family in Bologna, is forcibly taken from his parents by emissaries of the Pope in 1858. As you've seen, they believe he was baptized as an infant. And because it's illegal for non-Christians to raise a Christian child, as we've seen, the church's inquisitor grabs the 6-year-old boy away from his agonized parents and ships him off to Rome. Through political struggles, public protests, and a family caught up in a struggle to get back their child, we see it unfold with operatic levels of emotion over a 16-year span, filled with these startling twists and turns, realized with vivid cinematography, as you've seen, and exacting attention to period detail. Kidnapped brought us a timely resonance, not merely in its depiction of anti-Semitism, but it shows about the dangerous politics of power and religious belief. From the moment Father Folletti had learned 6-year-old Edgardo had been baptized as an infant, he sent the police to take 6-year-old Edgardo from his family. And we watched the scene as he cites Papal States policy for forbidding Christians from being raised by members of other faiths. The beginning opens in an ambiguous moment when we see the young woman going to the marketplace, getting the jar, and going home. We didn't see the baptism at that moment. When the Mortaras are told that the boy can remain with them if everyone in the household, including Edgardo's other siblings, converts, if they converted, Edgardo's father, Salomone, or known as Mamalo in the film, and his mother Mariana, pick a third agonizing, difficult path, as we've seen. They let the boy be taken away and retain their household's religious and cultural identity while they fought the church and state through the legal system and the newspapers in hopes of returning Edgardo to his birth family and pulling the whole establishment down. There aren't many scenarios more fundamentally appalling than the forced separation of children from their parents, as we know. Kidnap builds upon and complicates that sense of violation as it keeps cutting back to the family pursuing justice. The opening scenes of little Edgardo and his family dealing with representatives of the church are upsetting enough, not just because of what's happening, but because if you think about it, the representatives of the oppressors are, for the most part, soft-spoken. When the mayor walks in, he tries to do it in a friendly, soft-spoken way, rather than being flamboyantly cruel. At times, they seem almost embarrassed at having to enforce policies that their own organization devised and implemented. There are rules and laws, you see, and they have to be followed. No hard feelings. It's nothing personal, is their attitude. The movie also provokes the philosophical questions that exist alongside the fundamentals without making them too academic and extinguishing their fire. What does one do when a kidnapped person says they don't want to be rescued? If you try to pull them away from their adaptive circumstances anyway, against their will, is that kidnapping? Kidnapped is also an astute study of power, how it's acquired and maintained and exercised, and how poorly those who have gotten used to wielding it react after they wake up one morning and realize they're about to lose at least some of what they've got. Pope Pius himself is introduced, if you remember, poring over political cartoons that satirize both his policies and his appearance, the newspaper caricatures coming to animated life in a Looney Tunes fashion, with carnivalesque music in the background as he watches, them running after him. Bellocchio has a lot of fun illustrating the Pope's aggrieved and paranoid mind state, no more so than in a borderly blasphemous nightmare scene when a group of moles perform a vengeful bris on His Holiness. Yet Pius ironically emerges as the formidable father figure who completes Edgardo's conversion from defiant Jew to obsequious Catholic. One of the most unnerving anecdotes involves the game of hide and seek, if you remember, during which Edgardo conceals himself underneath Pius's robes, and the Pope eventually parting them like an impresario to reveal his young charge between his legs. It indeed a pivotal moment, echoing an earlier one in the beginning of the film when Edgardo hid behind his mother's skirts. And in the Jewish community's attempts to right the wrong, the representative of a Jewish newspaper in Bologna gets an audience with the Pope and is essentially warned, knock it off. Nearly as much attention is paid to the tone and presentation of the visitor's statements as their substance. Lower your voice and kneel down. Have you forgotten whose presence you are in? Boy, that sounds familiar. I'm thinking about this past week. Anyway, and then the Pope warns, then he adds, I could hurt you very badly. I could force you back into your hole. Do you remember when the ghetto gate was closed from dusk to dawn, or have you already forgotten? During the trial, when the tables are turned, even slightly, on the priest Folletti by his representatives of the secular legal system in Bologna, he gets his back up at being challenged, if you remember. I would like to make clear that the decisions, the judgments of the church are not subject to any other authority of an inferior position. He warns court officials who have come to interrogate him. And when he gets off, Salomone, having come to the end of an exhaustingly unproductive trial, lets loose with a prolonged, horrifically guttural howl. The movie depicts the 19th century church as a corrupt, brutal, power-drunk organization that positioned itself as a middleman between God and individuals in order to crush rival faiths, enforce patriarchy, guilt-trip most of the subjugated population into donating to them and obeying their edicts, and siphon off or steal material wealth and real estate. Late in the movie, when it becomes clear that the Papal States are about to get smacked down by the secular government, the top bosses of the church immediately begin discussing where to hide all the treasures they've amassed. If you remember, his exchequer says, we'll hide everything. And if you remember, even earlier, there was a scene when the Pope and his exchequer discussed the money donated, a loan to them by the Rothschilds, that if the loan were recalled, they would go bankrupt. And yet, not one of the frocked characters conducts himself on screen as totally malevolent. They're shown mainly as bureaucrats with turned around collars, company men. Pope Pius sometimes seems as if he's about to turn into an especially morbid exception. He's not merely twisted by life among the super powerful, but he's also got mental problems that will never properly be diagnosed. Yes, he is certainly feeling that he has become all-powerful among the all-powerful, among the moneyed of Italy. Bellocchio shows us a brutal convulsion of tyranny, power, and bigotry, with echoes of the Dreyfus affair in France, and later more horrific events to come during World War II, when the chilling Folletti finally tells a judge that in taking the Jewish child, he was merely executing a command from the Vatican. That is a familiar courtroom defense. The kidnapping of young Edgardo is a roundup in miniature, and the Pope's heartlessness, a forerunner of Pius VII's apparent wartime indifference to Nazi atrocities. And at the end, when the older, agonized Edgardo comes to see his mother on her deathbed, Bellocchio creates a moment that we might find incredulous, but it is Mariana, his mother, that rebukes his wish for her, holding fast to the faith she had hoped he would return to. All this material is presented not as a coolly observed case study in which bare facts are laid out, but something more in the spirit of grand tragic opera, or an epic movie melodrama from an earlier time. Bellocchio has directed operas, and here he goes full tilt on operatic moments. The cinematography seems to have been modeled on old masters like Rembrandt. Some of the scenes have a Godfather-like quality in the way that the single-source lighting falls on clothing and faces, and people are dealing in the half-darkness. The busy, booming orchestral score helps unify a script that has otherwise seemed too terse or schematic. It regularly reminds you of which side the movie is on. The music does play up the sides, and withholding the details of the early baptism until the courtroom scene near the end proves to be a master stroke on Bellocchio's part. It makes the entire tale seem even more tragic and at the same time absurd. Kidnapped is a work of substance and style. It tells its story with immediacy and a palpable sense of anger, even as it channels the work of past masters dating back decades, even centuries. Later in life, Edgardo found shelter, and this is a postscript to the film. Later in life, Edgardo found shelter in a convent of the Canons Regula, what was known as the Canons Regula in Austria, where he lived under an assumed name. In 1872, he moved to a monastery at Poitiers in France, where Pope Pius regularly corresponded with the bishop about the young man. After a year, Pio Edgardo Mortara was ordained as a priest. That required special dispensation because at age 21, he was technically too young. He received a personal letter from the Pope to mark the occasion, along with a lifetime trust fund of 7,000 lira to support him. Father Mortara spent most of the rest of his life outside Italy, traveling throughout Europe and preaching. It was said that he could give sermons in 6 languages, including Basque, and he read 3 more, including Hebrew. As a preacher, he was in great demand, not least because the inspirational way he was able to weave the remarkable story of his own childhood into his sermons. As he recounted it, his saga was the stuff of faith and hope, a story of how God chose a simple, illiterate servant girl to invest a small child with the miraculous powers of divine grace, and in doing so, rescued him from his Jewish family. Good people, but as Jews on a God-forsaken path, as he would put it. Mamalo Mortara, his father, died in 1871, shortly after spending 7 months in prison during a trial over the death of a servant girl who had fallen from a window of his apartment. The Florentine Court of Appeal found him guilty of murdering her, but he was acquitted by the Court of Assize. It turned out he hadn't murdered her. Pope Pius died in 1878. The same year, Mariana, Edgardo's mother, traveled to southwestern France, where she had heard Edgardo was preaching and enjoyed an emotional reunion with her son, who was pleased to see her, but disappointed when she refused his plea to convert to Catholicism. At the end, wasn't the first time. He had begged her to convert many times before. Edgardo thereafter attempted to reestablish connections with his family, but not all of his relatives were as receptive to him as his mother. Following Mariana's death in 1890, it was reported in French newspapers that she had finally, on her deathbed, and with Edgardo beside her, become a Christian. Edgardo refuted that I have always ardently desired that my mother embrace the Catholic faith, he wrote in a letter to a popular newspaper, and I tried many times to get her to do so. However, it never happened. It never happened. Although it was reported that she did in newspapers, it never happened, and he did report it. A year later, in 1891, Father Pio Edgardo Mortara returned to Italy for the first time in 20 years to preach in Modena. A sister and some of his brothers went to hear his sermon, and for the rest of his life, Edgardo called on his relatives whenever he was in Italy. During a 1919 journey to Rome, he visited the house of catechumens, the house he would grow up in as a little boy, that he had entered 61 years before. By that time, he had settled in an abbey in Liège, Belgium, which had a sanctuary to the Virgin of Lourdes, to which Father Mortara felt a special connection. The Lord's apparitions of 1858 having occurred in the same year as his own conversion to Christianity. Father Pio Edgardo Mortara resided there for the rest of his life and died there on the 11th of March, 1940, at the age of 88. So there you have his story. And there were so many spectacular scenes in the film, not the least of which the opening scene when they do take him, when they're holding him out the window, when his father's holding him out the window, and he doesn't, I was hoping, you hope maybe he'll drop him, they'll grab the kid and go, but it doesn't happen. And then we see the moments when the guards are sitting in their bedroom as if they're going to escape, and they're told to sit there and not let him go. And then when he does, and how they're lied to by Folletti, and they do take him to Rome. The ride to Rome is eventful when he's on the boat and he sees a funeral procession, which strikes him. And he's constantly looking at these things. And his mother, there is the sad moment when his mother gives him the mezuzah to take with him along the way, that he hides in his costume. Their exchange when she says to him, "Don't forget to say the Shema before you go to sleep." All of these things, it make some of us feel sad, for what's happening. And then when he finally gets there, he's not treated badly when he arrives, but we realize he's sleeping among other Jewish children who had been kidnapped or taken from their families. The catechumens was a house to raise Jewish children in Christianity. Anyway, we see, when he's talking to that other child, which is sort of humorous, and they're getting along, and he's telling him what to do. And then we realize there's the sick child that he sees, who finally at the funeral, his mother comes to put a mezuzah in the coffin. We realize that he was a Jewish child. There are so many moments like this. There is the moment when Edgardo goes into the chapel and he frees Jesus from the cross. He pulls out the nails and he frees him and watches him leave. This is such an interesting scene that's open to so much interpretation. When his brother arrives later on during the war. Now, that was what was known as the Reggimento, and it was a time when Garibaldi and the Italians were trying to take over Italy, trying to unite the states of Italy. And the church was against it because it would take away their power. And that's why they bombed. They eventually come into Rome and bomb their way in. But when his brother arrives, he doesn't want to leave. He doesn't want to leave. And there is that scene when the Pope is arriving, and Edgardo runs up and accidentally knocks him over. And what the Pope does to him, making him lick the floor 3 times with the sign of the cross. You're feeling for him, and then there is that moment. Again, these are all, incredible moments in the film, but there's that very incredible moment when they're moving the Pope's body to be buried, and the crowd wants to throw it into the river. And they were literally very angry at him at that period in time when they were moving the body. What happens there is all dramatic, is all fictional. But we see Edgardo all of a sudden changing. He goes from trying to protect the coffin to turning around and then joining the crowd. We see the conflict within him, the conflict within his soul that's rising up at that moment. But then subsides naturally. And then finally, the scene when his mother is dying, and he comes home, and his brother looks at him and says, why do you even do this? And he tries to convert her. And she says, I was born a Jew and I will die a Jew, sending him off. It was the film, is so dramatic, so searing, but it is a story mostly of power, and how it corrupts in this case, in terms of what happens with the Pope. But it does show a sense of, there was a rising sense of anti-Semitism during this period, not just in Italy, in France. It would come in all of these areas. And Bellocchio does an excellent job in bringing history to life during this period. The detail, the costuming, the lighting, the locations, all of it works in tandem, and the music score. But I thought the acting was terrific. The little boy who plays Edgardo, I will tell you something. I mean, he was terrific. His name is Enia Sala, and this was his first role. Now, here's a kicker that I don't know if some of you had found this out or had heard about it, but this originally was supposed to be done by Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg had bought the rights to the story, and he had written a script. He had a script written, and he could not find, as the story goes, as I read in research, the story goes that he could not find a young boy to play the part. and it delayed it so much. And also with problems of COVID and so much happening and his schedule, he decided not to do it. And Marco Bellocchio picked up the mantle. And it should, in all regards, it should be an Italian film. It's a totally Italian story. And it's told from this Italian point of view. And I thought he did a fabulous job. The actor who plays Pope Pius IX, Paolo Perobon, was terrific. He's a journeyman actor. He's played many roles in film, and he was terrific here. Fausto Russo Alessi as the father, Mamolo, very good. Barbara Ronchi has become lately one of Italy's top stars, who plays Mariana Mortara's mother. She was terrific. And we had so many the other kids were terrific in the film. So I hope you enjoyed it, appreciated it, enjoyed it for its filmic value, appreciated it for its historical value. And now I'd like to open it up for a conversation, what you have to say about it, what moments you want to talk about, production, whatever. So, okay, Linda.
All right, forgive me for being in the dark today.
That's okay.
I've heard this story many times in our family. I guess it must be at Passover. Many of these stories are reviewed, told, and told. The thing that I do know is that if the child was that ill, the way the Jewish people used to work in those days would be to rename the child. They never did that. The reason for renaming was to confuse the angel of death. And so the first question that I've always had with this whole thing was that why did this woman, without asking, without presenting this to the family, why did she run out with it? But they brought it out in the movie, and I've heard that too. She did it for money. It wasn't all for the conversion. So those are my feelings about it. There are stories.
Well,
There are many stories, by the way, like this.
yeah. What's interesting is the point the film makes, and it is ambiguous, whether or not she did truly baptize him. It was her word against others, and the fact was she was paid, and I know she was paid, and she came up, and concocted the story. Now she may have said I baptized him and really didn't, so that she would get paid by the church.
See, I never heard that. I heard she took the child to the church. I never
Yeah,
heard that she did the baptizing.
yeah. No, the story is as he tells it, and that was the story that seems to be, that was from the books that he had read and everything else, was the fact that, he, first of all, she thought he was going to die. He wasn't really going to die, and she decided, that she was going to baptize him, but she never really did. And that was the point. And she never used water from the church. First of all, we see her go across the street and get water.
Right.
So she never used holy water, so to speak.
Right.
And that's why. But see, what indicates what was really fuzzy about it was he gets baptized in the church later on.
Right.
The Pope sees that he gets baptized because they knew that if he hadn't been baptized, we better do it. And that was really what happened. So I thought that was very interesting in the way they handled it. There are a lot of ambiguities going on that we see. But thank you, Linda. Rachel.
I loved this movie. I thought it was fantastic from every element of it. And sometimes when it's a longer movie, which this was, I didn't feel compelled to look at my watch. I was engrossed in the story. I thought it was interesting sometimes that they showed um, his family getting together and his in church. Like it's almost like a side by side. And it was kind of interesting how they filmed those to show how his world right now and how the world of his family and showing it simultaneously. And it was so well acted and so believable. And it was just like I think I don't know how true it was about fusion because he ended up going with Christianity. So, and showing that anger, know if that was a dramatic effect that really did not happen because, it's been, so many years. And the most heart-wrenching scene, and it reminded me like of Sophie's Choice, but like the heart-wrenching scene with the mother, when he hugs her and says, "Don't leave me," because he finally does break down with her, and it's such a heart-wrenching scene because, as her mother, I can't imagine what she went through, and she was always trying to get him back. But, it changes a person what they go through. And he ended up being Christian on his own when he was an adult. And it's just a fascinating story that I never knew about. And it was done beautifully.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, what you speak of is so interesting because he does, we have to remember he's a 6-year-old boy and he's extremely impressionable. And when they take him to the House of Catechumens, and he's looking wide-eyed around, and the way they dress him, the outfit that they put him in, and all the other boys, and when the other boys are accepting, doing the catechism, and they're accepting the host, and he's, what is this? What is this all about? There's a lot of pomp going on, and there's enough to attract a child to make him think, wow, this is it's as if they're welcoming him into their house. They certainly didn't want to seem malevolent. There's no reason they would want to seem malevolent towards him to make him see his way. So we can understand. We can certainly understand how he could want to embrace the faith, so to speak, to embrace that faith. But yes, the scene when his mother finally comes to see him and he does break down, it's that last moment of being broken up, of the family literally being broken up and him being torn away, which is sad to see. But thank you, Jackie.
I agree with Rachel on that scene. I also, to be honest with you, thought the most heart-wrenching scene was when the father was hitting his head after the trial, because it was like
Yeah.
everything was over. He felt like they'd done everything they could and it didn't work. I thought that little boy was stunningly beautiful. And I thought he did a terrific job because in the silence of him not saying anything at all said so much. I mean, his facial expressions and the wonderment that he had. I do disagree about the music. I thought the music in places was, I know they were trying to make it harsh to show a purpose, but I thought it was unnecessarily harsh. And that's one of the first times I would ever say in any of the movies we've watched that I did not care for the musical score from it. But the rest of it, I mean, we did enjoy. Larry really likes the historical aspect of it. And I was glad that you explained that scene in the bedroom with all the Jewish men and the Pope. I got a little confused with that, to be honest with you. I did not get that was a dream or a nightmare. A couple of the nightmare things I missed, and I kept thinking, wait a minute, what is happening here? Where are his papal guards? So it made more sense when you said that was a dream and a nightmare. But so it was very interesting. I agree with Rachel. I thought it was beautifully done. we both thought it was a tad on the long side, but it was very interesting.
Yeah, you know, and when you talk about the music, I talk about it that way because, you know, this could be an opera. You could see this as an opera. In other words, if somebody wanted to write a libretto, you could see this story is very operatic because it's calling on so many things, dealing with power, dealing with the church, dealing with a child who's kidnapped from his family. All of these things are very operatic, you know, moments that you could write a libretto for. I don't know where you're going to find a kid to sing like that, but you know, it would be, I could see it happening. I mean, we're seeing modern operas today dealing with such subjects. I mean, an opera opened in New York this week called Moby Dick. So you can almost see, you know, these things becoming operas. And I felt that at times. You know, it's that somebody could burst out singing within the frame. But I also saw there were little things going on. Now I know his ex-checker, the guy that was handling the money, if you noticed, he kept going like this with coins. Reminded me of Humphrey Bogart in the Gay Mutiny. You know, it's somebody who's paranoid, somebody who's dealing with, you know, there was a paranoia, you know, that they're against us. What do I do? And also he's doing it because he's dealing with a crazy Pope, you know, and you get the feeling like he knew that the Pope was a little mentally unstable, and how do I deal with him? You know, how do we deal with this guy? It's very interesting. I mean, you know, I don't know if Bellocchio is tuned into American politics, but I certainly could feel it at certain points. So it is interesting. Anyway, Barbara Tate.
Yeah. I was stunned. The first thing, I was just visually stunned when it opened up. I mean, I was stunned. And it was just so beautiful and so dim. It was almost as if it was a black and white movie. And I just kept kind of watching it without you know, like thinking about the movie. There wasn't anything about the movie I didn't like. I love the actors. I love the cinematography. The music did not bother me. I had not known the story, but you know, I know enough about the Catholic Church and what they did. I didn't know that particular story. It was just beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's first of all, it's also, I am very much a fan of Marco Bellocchio, and I've seen many of his films, and this follows his course. I mean, it definitely has, you know, has his fingerprints. This is his style of cinematography, his style of the way he uses the music, the way he tells a story. He does like to balance his story, just as Rachel said, you know, showing the family intercut with what was happening with the church. So we understand all sides. We get a perspective, and that's his way of doing it. It really was. I thought it's one of his better, more powerful works. Thank you, Karen.
Yes, I really enjoyed the story as well. I like history a lot, and I enjoyed all of it. The story, you know, I felt the sadness of the family losing their child and having to make a decision. But you know, I also could understand how the child would be. He had to learn how to survive in the environment that he was in, and so he did what he could to learn everything. The music I thought was actually enhanced the movie, the drama of the movie, and I also did not feel the time. So it was a great story. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Sandra.
I was quite taken with how many times they showed that image of the crucified
Jesus.
Christ, and the blood, and when he asked why was he bleeding and who killed him, and they said the Jews, and I thought that whole thing was helped him in his conversion to Christianity. I thought that was a strong point in that movie, because it kept showing it all the time. And he pulled the nails out, and I thought that was a strong influence in his decision. That was
Yeah, well, that's why I say it's an ambiguous moment. You know,
Yeah.
it also, you know, can be perceived as he's setting him free. You know, wondering why, you know, I mean, I can't imagine a 6-year-old boy intellectually comes to that point of saying, why are they showing him like that? Why is he being portrayed that way when he feels he's setting him free? You know, he should be free, and he does set him free. You know, is it Bellocchio also, you know, acknowledging that? So there is a whole, you know, there's a whole context there that really, you know, can be debated of that moment. It is a
they made a
powerful moment
point
in the
of telling
film.
him that of telling the little boy that the Jews killed him. So I caught that, you know.
Yeah,
So,
well, reversing that fact.
yeah.
I'm Erwin. I finally
Yeah, hi, Erwin.
screen tonight. A couple of things, and it's really regarding the superficial part of the film. In reading the some of the stuff about the director, said he was raised in the church, but he's a Marxist and lives as an atheist. So
Yeah.
that plus also has an influence on his view of the church. And secondly, I read a thing, I believe, a Catholic Digest commenting on the history, and they strongly affirm Anna, who's the housemaid. They strongly confirm her version of the events, and said she only made it public after 5 years later, when another child in the family died, and that led her to say, well, she had saved by baptizing baptizing him. She had saved him, but she was unable to save the other child. But those were just things that I gleaned from from looking at some other bits of information that are.
Yeah, well, of course they would say that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
of course they would say that. But as far as Bellocchio is concerned, I mean, he went all over the map. He was raised Catholic.
Yeah.
He became very rebellious at a young age. He was very bright. You're right. He did become a Marxist. He was also a communist as well as a Marxist. He was part of and then he separated himself from the Communist Party. He wound up, you know, declaring himself an atheist. He was liberal at one time, and he became conservative. He's been all over the map, but he is a great director. All the same, his imagery, his storytelling is what we look at.
What about the coins that the mother gave him? The 3 coins that the mother gave Edgardo when she saw him. She handed him 3 coins.
There was just handing him money, handing him money for himself.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't really, you know, see it as more than that. Thank you, Sandra. Jackie?
Sandra brought up a point that I wanted to add to, and I hadn't thought about that until right that minute. You know, it was interesting when he took the nails out of the hanging Christ or the crucified Christ, and the Christ got down and looked at him and walked away. I thought that was very symbolic, because an all-loving and all-knowing Christ would not have just turned his back and walked away on that kid. So I thought that was very symbolic of the ambiguity and the struggle within his own mind as to what he was doing. I actually thought that was very, very good right there, that symbolic one.
That's terrific. Yeah, I think it was. It is a symbolic moment. There's no question about it. But I think it could be read in so many different ways, really open to suggestion. Who else do I say? Nancy. Nancy, you got to unmute yourself.
Got it. Did you just say the director wasn't very bright?
No, he was
Didn't you
very
just
bright.
say I thought you just said that the director, I thought I heard you say that the director wasn't very bright. No?
No,
Okay.
he was
I
very
mean, I
bright.
thought it was
That's
brilliant. I thought the
yeah.
whole film was one of the most brilliant films I've seen in a long time. I mean, I didn't know the story, and so that alone was a brilliant story. I thought that the kid who played Edgardo was brilliant, but I thought at the end, I sensed a great deal of conflict within him, right after his mother died. And he goes out in the hall, and you can just, I could sense a great deal of conflict with it, right or wrong, but it's just what I got. But I thought it was great. I did not think it was long at all, and I'm very, very sensitive to that. And no, I thought it was wonderful. And the music and the cinematography, the whole works, the whole 9 yards, I thought was a wonderful, wonderful film. Thank you
Oh, good.
for killing it.
But when you think about it, why would I say he wasn't bright after talking about
I don't
him in
know.
this
I thought I
movie?
heard you say that.
No,
Okay.
no.
All right.
I said
All
he
right.
was very bright, he grew
Oh,
up, he
I
was
thought.
very smart. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. I thought that's why I thought. That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's okay.
All right. Fine. Thank you.
Lucille, you got to unmute yourself, Lucille.
There we go.
There
Okay,
you go.
am I
Yes,
unmuted?
yes, you
Okay.
are.
I was thinking about that, what Nancy just said, and I was remembering the expression on his face after he sat down. To me, what I saw, I'm not saying that what you saw was wrong at all, but what I really saw was a sadness. And I felt that he truly believed he was giving his mother a gift, and that it was sad for him that she wouldn't take it, and sad, I don't know, he ended up getting so much of this teaching from the church that he really did fully believe it and was living it. In fact, it said that I read, I guess, I don't know if it was in the movie or if I read it somewhere else, that afterwards he spent many more years continuing to, give through his position to the poor, to whatever, and served in different places. And I don't know, I found that part of the movie just very, very touching. Very, very touching.
Yes, it was, and his sadness. Yes, it could definitely be interpreted as sadness because he wanted to give his mother eternal life. I mean, he
Yes.
wanted her to be accepted, and because it's not their belief, and therefore she was rejecting it, and it was in a sense because of what he is accepting, he might not be with her in death. And that's, there is so much to read in all of that, in terms of the differences in faith. And yes, I mean, you bring up a very interesting, both you and Nancy bring up a very interesting moment, is the fact of why he could have been, why he walks away saddened by that moment. And he was close to her over the years. I mean, they did correspond. She did go to see him. A mother doesn't want to reject her child despite of what he's doing, unless he's going out and killing people, but he wasn't. And it is a sad moment in the film. It's the film can be interpreted as a tragedy in many aspects, in certain aspects. So yes, thank you. Anybody else out there have anything else they'd like to add?
I
Yes,
wanted to say
Barbara.
something. Oh, okay.
Barbara?
I'm unmuting. Hi, everybody. You know, earlier when you said this was about power, I was thinking that the church lost and the Jews won. Because at any moment in this movie, they could have converted and had their son back. And even to death, the mother says, "This is who I am, and you won't own me that way." Um, so even her son didn't have the power over her to make her be a different person than who she was. The other thing is, while I was listening, I looked up his other films, mostly which I haven't seen, but I did see Vincere, which is about the
Yes.
young Mussolini. It may even be one you showed a long time ago.
That's right. You saw it with
And
me.
so I thought, to the extent to which Bellocchio is an auteur, that's another story about a fascist authoritarian, how somebody becomes that way, and the terrible damage they do to people who love them. Because he had a young wife who loved him, and when he became a fascist, as I remember, he started a second family and disowned her, and she winds up in a mental I mean, it was a wonderful movie, really, but a very similar theme in a way. And the last thing I want to say is, sometimes we Jews think these stories are unique to us, but I think of all the Indian schools, the Native American schools in Canada and this country, where the kids were taken away and treated somewhat more cruelly than we see here. It's a
Oh, I think we lost her.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, she froze.
Mhm.
Well, to her point, hopefully she'll be able to get back in, but to her point, there is a film that was out this year that was nominated for an Academy Award dealing with just the same thing, called The Nickel
The Nickel
Boys.
Boys, right?
Yeah. We didn't hear the end of your comments, though, Barbara. We lost you for a moment.
I talked about the Native Americans. I talked about,
Yes.
yeah, just that these stories are not unique to the Jews. I mean,
Right.
it's the damage that racism, anti-Semitism does, authorities who think they knew better, they know better, and the steadfastness with which people hold on to their culture, their religion in this case.
Yes, yes, and I thank you for bringing up Vincere, because that is also a very operatic film. It's same style, same thinking. As a matter of fact, he did a film, a film about Aldo Moro, the Italian prime minister who was kidnapped and assassinated by the Red Brigades in Italy. And is the same kind of story again, of authority and power being usurped and taking it, and also follow the same style, and of which will be a television. He redid it for television. It will be a limited series on Netflix. That's what he'll be dealing with, is the death of Aldo Moro. Which is a very interesting story, a very representative story of the time of the Red Brigades in Italy, what they call the years of lead. So thank you, Barbara. Anyone else? I know, Rachel, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I was just curious about one aspect that it's minor, but when the father goes to Anna, the servant that he had for many, and he questions her, "Did you baptize my child? Did you? Did you?" And she with him for 7 years, and yet she's like talking in another language. And I was like, wait a second, she didn't really answer the question. I guess she's afraid to, but I was like, I don't get that. I don't understand how that happened. She was working for them and they spoke to each other. And then all of a sudden now, when it's most important, when he's asking, did you baptize my child? She's giving like some kind of, I don't know, mumbo jumbo.
Well, she was talking in another dialect. They couldn't understand her. It was she came from a different area, so she was talking in another dialect. That's why they said, I don't understand what she's saying. She was speaking another Italian dialect, which, because if you, in the history of Italy at that period especially, people spoke different dialects. They still do. In fact, I remember seeing an Italian film that had Italian subtitles and about 3 layers of them, because that different parts of Italy have to get their subtitles differently. They read the words differently. So it's an interesting comment. Mel.
Yes, I just want to make 1 point or 2 points. Number one, it's been known for thousands of years. If you take a child relatively young, you can convert him to anything that you bring him up as. And even Hitler said, give me a child under 7, I'll give you a Nazi. And this is basically what we're seeing. A young man, a young boy taken by the church and indoctrinated. And so he just assumes that's the correct way.
Oh, certainly.
The other thing interesting, in most Jewish families, if someone leaves the family, they disown the individual, they make believe he died. But in this situation, they kept on that child. They had the hope they could bring him back.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Mel. Okay, in wrapping up, I want to tell you about our next film, which is coming at the end of the month on March 27th. Originally, I had planned to discuss La Strada, but I had discussed this earlier. And maybe I was in a COVID fog when I did it. I don't know. Anyway, the next film will be Il Posto. Remember, the theme is then and now in each culture. And we did the now with this film, a contemporary film, and we go back to the past to 1961. And Il Posto is, as I said, 1961 in Italy. We follow the lives of Domenico and Antoinetta, 2 suburban Italian youths seeking a job for life from a big city corporation. It's during the time of the economic miracle in Italy. Corporate life was coming into being, and this takes place in Milan. After a bizarre screening process that these kids had to go through to get a job, the 2 are finally placed, combining neorealism, which we've discussed many times, and I will discuss again when we meet, combining neorealism and documentary techniques. This classic film is a snapshot of Italy's awakening to that post-war economic miracle. It's filled with humor and poignancy, but the detail is wonderful, and it's shot in glorious black and white. So I look forward to discussing that with you. I think it's a wonderful film, representative of a time. It is a time capsule in many ways. So you have a good month, and I will see you on the 27th, hopefully.
Thank you,
Okay,
everybody.
thank you so much.
Very
Thank
much.
you.
Shelley, will
Thank
you
you.
stop the recording since I got kicked out at one point?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Either
thank
that or
you.
you'll see me eating dinner, whatever.
I don't know what
Thank
it
you.
was. It kicked me out. So thank you,
Good.
everybody. Good night.
Thank
We will
you.
see you
Good
next
night.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley.
Okay,
Shelley.
thank you. Be well. Barbara,
Thanks,
nice
kiddo.
seeing you. Okay, the video, Jackie,
Just
Yes,
come
dear.
in. Get up.
I have bad news.
Well, probably if we just close out the meeting, it will stop the video.
I don't think the video is on.
Well, mine shows that it's recording, but I'll let them know.
Oh,
I don't
is
know
it?
what it did. It kicked us out at part way through, and then you let us back in, and it didn't let me back in as the host. But I'll let everybody know that it didn't. It may not have recorded all the way and what happened. So anyway,
Yeah.
thanks for at least trying.
They can call me.
Okay,
Ready,
I'll
say
talk-
hi, Shelley.
I'll talk to you.
Bye.
Thanks, Shelley. Bye.
Thank you. Take care,
Bye,
everybody.
Jackie. Bye,
Good night,
Larry.
everybody.
Bye-bye.